He told me his lawful wife was frail and would not live many years. I was to endure being his concubine for a little while. Once she died, he said, he would raise me to the position of wife. Later, when I truly married another man, he stood in front of my bridal sedan with bloodshot eyes and demanded, "Did you not say I was the only man you ever wished to marry? Hey, my gorgeous queens, welcome back." A woman waits years for her noble lover to promise marriage, only to discover he wants her as a concubine while his lawful wife lives. So she walks away and marries a butcher who gives her the one thing the nobleman never would. Front gate, let's go. I was said to be the most beautiful woman in all of Shangjing. I was also said to be the most ungrateful. On my wedding night, the chamber door was kicked open while I sat properly upon the bridal bed, clutching the little brass hand warmer Hanye had pressed into my hands, only moments before snow was falling outside. A gust of bitter wind drove fine grains of snow into the room. Before I could even look up, the world before me suddenly brightened. Someone had torn away my red bridal veil. Pei Jingheng stood before me. He must have ridden hard all the way here. Unmelted snow clung to his moon-white brocade robes, and several strands of hair had escaped the immaculate knot he always wore. His eyes, usually softened by the faintest hint of a smile, were painfully red. Zhiyai. His voice was hoarse when he spoke my name. My treacherous heart still tightened. 2 years. I had thought I had carved those 3 syllables out of my very bones. Yet the moment he stood before me, I recognized the scent of agarwood on him at once. Once I had loved that fragrance more than anything. So much that whenever he passed our door, I would invent some excuse to refill a teapot, just so I could linger nearby a little longer. Looking back now, it was rather humiliating. "You truly married him." He stared at me as though the evidence before his eyes could not possibly be real. I lowered my gaze to my wedding robes. The phoenix crown weighed so heavily that my neck ached. My aunt and I had embroidered every thread of gold at my cuffs by hand. Even the soles of my crimson wedding shoes still bore a little ash from stepping over the ceremonial brazier. How much more real did he need it to be? But I did not laugh. I merely tightened my fingers around the edge of my sleeve and answered, "Yes." Pei Jingheng's face darkened at once. "You would rather marry a butcher than come with me?" With those words, the last trace of ache in my chest suddenly faded. Even now, he still did not understand. I looked up at him. "Come with you?" Pei Jingheng, in what capacity would I go with you? His lips parted. No answer came. I was not surprised in the least. 2 years ago, when I first asked whether he would marry me, he had fallen silent in exactly the same way. It had been a fine spring day. He sat in a waterside pavilion choosing hairpins for me. Jade, white nephrite, gold filigree, pearls and beads covered the table. He lifted a begonia hairpin and held it against my hair with a smile. "This suits you." I had been so hopelessly in love with him that the question escaped before I could stop it. "Pei Jingheng, will you marry me one day?" His hand paused. Then he slid the hairpin into my hair and said, as though nothing had happened, "Wear this one today. It looks lovely on you." He never answered. I asked again afterward, once twice. More times than I cared to count. Eventually I could predict exactly how he would evade me before I even opened my mouth. He would send finer jewels. He would reserve the best private room in the finest tavern. He would have lychees brought all the way from the south, because I had once mentioned them in passing. But he would never say, "I will marry you." Once, driven beyond patience, I laid the matter bare. "If you were nothing but an impoverished scholar, or even a butcher in some country village, I would still marry you, so long as you took me through the front gate as your lawful wife." He laughed. There was fondness in that smile, and beneath it, a touch of indulgent disbelief. "Zheyi, why must you press me so? Be mine, and I can protect you for the rest of your life just the same." I grieved over those words for an entire night. The next morning, I still dressed my hair and powdered my face, pretending nothing had happened, because I could not bear to let him go. I kept telling myself to wait a little longer. Perhaps he truly had difficulties he could not speak of. Perhaps if he came to love me just a little more, he would finally be willing. What I waited for instead was news of his betrothal to Lady Xia. That day he even held my hand, speaking with the gentle patience one might use to soothe a foolish child. Zilingyi has always been sickly. The marriage is merely an arrangement between our families. Be good later, when I did not let him finish. I was afraid that if I heard another word, I would weep in front of him, so I simply withdrew my hand, smiled, and wished him and Lady Xia long life together. His expression turned ugly. Have I not treated you well enough? He asked. Only then did I finally understand. It was not that he did not know what I wanted. He simply believed I had no right to ask for it. Remembering that now, I looked at the man before me. My heart still ached faintly, but I no longer wished to ask him why. You see, I said softly. You still cannot answer. I told you I would never mistreat you. His voice tightened. Gold, silver, a house of your own, silk and satin. What have you ever wanted that I denied you? But those were never what I wanted. I met his eyes. I wanted to marry the man I loved. I paused after saying it. That sentence still hurt. Because once, long ago, I truly had dreamed of marrying him. The red wedding candles would have been his, the phoenix crown would have been his gift. The man bowing with me before heaven and earth should have been him. But I had buried those dreams one by one with my own hands. Aunts, that man was you. Pei Jingheng's head snapped up. A spark of hope flared in his eyes. With my next words, I extinguished it myself. Now he is not. The room fell utterly silent. Then heavy footsteps sounded outside the door. Han Yue had returned. He was still wearing the bright red wedding robes from our ceremony. The hem was a little too short and showed a stretch of black boot. He had likely been seeing off guests in the front courtyard, for a thin dusting of snow lay across his broad shoulders. He saw Pei Jingheng first and stopped. Yet the first place his eyes truly settled was on me. Are you cold? My nose suddenly stung. All the hurt I had kept from spilling before Pei Jingheng nearly rushed out at those three simple words. I quickly lowered my head. A little. Han Yue crossed the room, shut the door against the wind, then touched the hand warmer in my grasp. Only after confirming that it was still warm did he relax. Then, at last, he turned to Pei Jingheng. Young Master Pei. This was a man who could carry half a butchered hog over one shoulder without breathing hard. Yet now, standing before a nobleman's son, the tips of his ears had actually gone red. Today is Ziyi's and my wedding day. If you have come to drink our wedding wine, I can set another bowl and pair of chopsticks for you. If you have come to take my wife— He stopped, plainly searching for the proper words. That will not do. I could not help it. I laughed aloud. Pei Jingheng's face turned black as thunder. He stared at Han Yue for a long moment, then looked back at me. Very well. Shen Jieyi, do not regret this. I took the red veil from his hand and lowered it over my face again. The world became crimson once more. This time I did not look at him. Young Master Pei need not trouble himself on my account. I may possess few great talents, but once I have chosen my path, I do not turn back. That night, Pei Jingheng stood outside our door for a very long time. I knew because his shadow lingered against the paper window. Truthfully, I was not nearly as carefree as I had pretended. When Han Yue went to the kitchen for hot water, I sat alone on the bridal bed staring at that shadow until my eyes burned. I remembered how fiercely I had once loved Pei Jingheng. You remembered every answer he had avoided. At last, I reached up and tugged my veil a little lower. If I could not see him, perhaps it would be easier. The matter between Pei Jingheng and me was known throughout Shangjing, not because I had wished to parade it before the city. He had done enough parading for both of us. We first met at the begonia banquet in the southern quarter of the capital. I had only recently come to Shangjing with my aunt, and we lived in an unremarkable lane in the western quarter. My aunt earned her living embroidering bridal gowns, and now and then I delivered finished work for her. That day, I had taken embroidery to a household whose begonias happened to be in full bloom. I was waiting beneath a covered gallery when Pei Jingheng emerged from behind the flowering trees. The moment he saw me, he stopped. Later, he told me that for an instant he had forgotten where he had been going and what he had meant to do. I blushed when I heard it, though I said, "Young Master Pei must have spoken such pretty words to many maidens." He smiled beautifully. "Heaven is my witness, I have said them only to you." Only afterward did she learn. He already had a lawful wife. He bought my mother a separate residence and gave her money. But he never intended to bring her through his family's front gate. In the end, my mother took me and left. All her life. There was no word she hated more than kept woman. Before she died, she held my hand and said, "Gee, there is no shame in being poor, and hardship will not kill you. The worst thing a person can do is decide, in her own heart, that she stands beneath others." From the time I was old enough to understand, I held fast to one belief. I could live without silk and jewels. I could sleep in a small courtyard and eat plain rice and humble fare. But if I ever married, I would enter openly through the front gate as a lawful wife. I told Pei Jingheng that very early on. He always thought I was merely being stubborn. At first, whenever he gave me jewelry, I would secretly delight in it. Then he began coming more and more often, and my reputation grew worse with every visit. Some said I had used every trick in the book to ensnare the young master of the Pai clan. Others said I was already his woman, hidden away outside his household. I heard crueler things as well. The first time I shut myself in my room and cried for half the afternoon. When Pei Jingheng came the next day, I asked him with swollen eyes, "Those rumors outside, did your people spread them?" He frowned. "Who dares slander you, tell me, and I will deal with them." I believed him. Only much later did I learn that, although he had not spoken those words himself, he had deliberately allowed them to spread. He thought that if no man dared marry me, I would eventually bow my head and yield to him. He was far too accustomed to being obeyed. So when I truly began seeking a marriage, all of Shangjing waited for the spectacle. My aunt asked several matchmakers to help. The first family heard my name and immediately claimed our birth charts were ill-matched. The second had already shown interest, only to change their minds the very next day. The third did not even cross our threshold. My aunt slammed her sewing basket onto the table in fury. "What in heaven's name does that Pei whelp want? He has taken a wife of his own. Does he mean to forbid every other man in the capital from marrying you?" I was embroidering the final cuff of a wedding gown at her words. My hand stilled. The needle pierced my fingertip. A drop of blood fell onto the crimson satin. I stared at that dark red stain for a long while and suddenly wanted to cry. Not because I feared no one would marry me. Because only then did I finally admit the truth. Pei Jingheng was not ignorant of what he was doing. He simply refused to let me go. My aunt saw my silence and sighed. "Then do not marry. Stay with me. Your aunt can feed you." I sniffed, put my pricked fingertip to my lips and sucked away the bead of blood. "I will marry. Why should I not?" With silk thread of the same shade, I worked the little bloodstain into a tiny plum blossom. I mean to live well enough for him to see it. 3 days later, Han came to meet me. My aunt pulled me aside and whispered, "He owns a butcher's shop in the southern quarter, 2 years older than you. No parents, no family. Under his roof lives alone. Only what? He looks a little fierce." She made me laugh. If a butcher looked like some pale scholar from the opera stage, even the pigs would refuse to fear him. I changed into a pale pink dress before going out to meet him. Winter had come early that year, and the brazier in our room burned weakly. Wanting to look presentable for a suitor, I wore only 2 thin layers. When Han entered, he was indeed a large man, deep-set brows, broad shoulders, an old scar across the back of one hand. The moment he saw me, his entire body went rigid. I waited and waited. He did not say a word, so I spoke first. "I hear young Master Han sells meat." "Neem, do you own a house?" "Yes." "Any debts?" "Number, do you drink gamble?" "I do not gamble. As for wine, a little at festivals." The more questions I asked, the straighter he sat. He looked less like a man meeting a prospective bride and more like a prisoner before the magistrate. Holding back a smile, I asked one more. "Have you heard the rumors about me?" This time he fell silent. The warmth in my chest slowly cooled, of course. I was already preparing to rise and see him out when he suddenly said, I stopped. And you still came? He looked up at me. His eyes were very dark and very steady. People say you are vain and hungry for wealth, that you wished only to climb into the PA household. But if that were true, you would have gone with young Master PA long ago. He can give you far more than I ever could. For once, I had no answer. All those days, everyone had wondered whether my pride was merely a performance. Even my aunt, aching for me, would sometimes say that there was no shame in bending a little if it made life easier. Yet this man, who had known me for less than the time it took tea to cool, had stumbled over the simplest truth. If riches were all you wanted, why would you have refused him? My eyes suddenly burned, so he would not see. I lowered my head and lifted my teacup. Han Yue frowned instead. Are you not cold-dressed like that? I stared at him. He pushed the cup of hot tea before him across the table toward me. Mine are rough. I am used to heat. It will not hurt me. Steam curled slowly from the cup. I held it between my palms for a long while without speaking. When Pei Jingheng first saw me, he said I looked like an immortal maiden beneath the begonias. When Han Yue first saw me, he asked whether I was cold. And in that moment, I began to understand what I had truly been seeking all these years. Before he left, I asked him, if you married me, would you take concubines? He nearly knocked over his stool in fright. No, why not? He scratched his head and struggled for an answer. I am afraid I would do poorly enough caring for one wife. I finally laughed aloud. And you still dare marry? Han Yue laughed too. He looked fierce when he was solemn, but when he smiled there was something almost foolishly gentle about him. I want to. He said it plainly. So I dare. Our marriage was arranged quickly. Han Yue brought nearly all the savings he had gathered over the years as his betrothal gifts. There were no rare treasures among them. 2 bolts of red silk, a pair of silver bracelets, 6 boxes of pastries, and a wooden hairpin he had chosen himself after much deliberation. Even the matchmaker was embarrassed on his behalf. In private, she told my aunt, for a beauty such as Miss Shen, I have never seen a betrothal gift so humble. I wore that wooden hairpin all winter, because Han Yue told me he had spent an entire hour choosing it in the woodworker's shop. The carving looks a little like locust blossoms. There is an old locust tree in my courtyard. When you move in, it flowers in spring. It is very pretty. He could not bring himself to look at me while he spoke. And suddenly, I found myself looking forward to a little courtyard I had never even seen. On the 3rd day after our wedding, I went with him to the butcher's shop for the first time. Every neighbor who saw me looked twice. Summono murmured, "Is that not the woman young Master Pei wants?" Before the sentence was finished, Han Yue set his bone cleaver down hard upon the chopping block. My wife. Only 2 words. The entire stall fell silent. Standing behind him, I felt my eyes sting. On the way home, I deliberately teased him. Why were you so fierce just now? The poor man had not even finished speaking, Han Yue muttered. Nothing good was coming after that. I may not be clever, but I am not deaf. I laughed so hard I nearly doubled over. He had no idea what was so funny. He merely caught my arm to keep me from tripping over the stones. After that, my world suddenly became very small. Small enough that my daily thoughts were filled with firewood, rice, oil, salt, and whether we had enough lamp wicks for the week. Han Yue left for the shop before dawn. Sometimes I helped with his accounts. He was dreadful with numbers. His ledger looked as though a flock of drunken crows had scratched across it. The first time I saw it, I struck his arm with the book in sheer exasperation. You took 400 copper coins for 10 gin of meat and wrote down 40. At this rate, by month's end do you intend for us to live on wind? Han Yue accepted the blow without protest. Then you can keep the accounts from now on. And why should I? Because you are clever. I had another scolding ready. Somehow I could not say it. Pei Jingheng's favorite praise had always been that I was beautiful. Me eyes were beautiful. My hands were beautiful. Every gown looked beautiful on me. Han Yue rarely praised any of that. He would say I worked an abacus quickly. He would insist my pickled vegetables were better than Auntie Chen's next door. After I finished bargaining with a livestock seller, he would look at me with grave wonder and ask, How do you know how to do everything? When he spoke that way, I did not feel like a flower arranged in a vase for someone else to admire. I felt like a whole person, a useful one. Little by little, I came to love that life. I loved sitting in the sun beneath the locust tree. I loved waiting for him to close the shop and come home. I loved that even when he had earned only a few dozen copper coins, he always brought something back for me, sometimes a pastry, sometimes a new osmanthus sweet from a street stall. Once, for reasons known only to heaven, he came home with a child's pellet drum. I shook it twice and stared at him, torn between laughter and despair. Why did you buy this? His ears reddened. The seller said maidens like them. Which maidens? He thought very hard. I do not know. I shoved the little drum back into his arms. Then keep it and play with it yourself. That night, however, I quietly placed it on my dressing table. Hanyue saw it. The corners of his mouth stayed lifted until he fell asleep. Sometimes I still thought of Pei Jingheng. Especially late at night, a person does not step into another courtyard and leave every old feeling outside the gate. Once I dreamed Pei Jingheng stood beneath the begonia tree calling my name. When I woke, my chest felt painfully tight. Hanyue slept lightly and woke as well. He did not ask whom I had dreamed of. He merely pulled the quilt higher over my shoulder. Will you sleep again? I looked at him for a long time. Then, without warning, I moved closer and rested against his chest. Hanyue's entire body went stiff. With my eyes closed, I whispered, "Do not move." He truly did not. Even his breathing grew shallow and careful. At that moment, I wanted very badly to cry. So this was what it felt like to be treated with tenderness without first having to prove that I deserved it. Near the end of the year, Shangjing saw its first heavy snow. Before Hanyue left for the market, I helped him into the new padded coat I had made. He grinned until his eyes nearly vanished. If I wear this, a shun will turn green with envy. Envious of what? His wife cannot sew one. I smacked him at once. Do not go boasting before the man. He ran off laughing. Before disappearing through the gate, he poked his head back in. There is a new pastry shop in the eastern quarter. I will bring you something when I return. I stood by the door and watched him go. For some reason, unease clung to me all that day. By evening, the snow had grown heavier. I waited beneath the locust tree for a long time. At last the courtyard gate opened and Hanyue stumbled inside. He was still guarding a packet of pastries against his chest. But he was hurt. He said there had been trouble at the market. He tried to make it sound like nothing. A few men drank too much and overturned the stall. I said nothing. I rolled back his sleeve. A dark purple bruise from a cudgel circled his wrist. His shoulder was badly swollen too. Common drunken brawlers did not strike only one man's stall. Nor did they stand nearby and warn, "Stay away from Miss Shen, and perhaps your business can continue." A shun told me those words in secret. Hanyue knew he could no longer hide it. He lowered his head. "I am fine." "Of course you are fine." My voice shook. "Had they struck a little harder, would you still be sitting here telling me that?" He dared not answer. I rubbed medicine into his bruises. The longer I worked, the angrier I became. At last, a tear fell onto the back of his hand. Hanyue panicked. He reached up to wipe my face. I turned away. "I am sorry. You did nothing wrong. This came because of me." The moment I said it, something twisted inside my chest. The thing I had feared most had still come to pass. I had believed that once I married, everything would finally end. Yet Pei Jingheng would not even allow me a quiet life. Hanyue was silent for a moment, then he took my hand. "It is not you." I looked up. "He is the one who did wrong. Do not carry another man's wickedness on your own back." I stared at him. Hanyue usually needed a heartbeat too long to find his words. This time, each one came slow and certain. "I married you because I wished to. He came to make trouble because he chose to behave like a scoundrel. None of that is your fault." My tears fell even faster. Hanyue panicked completely and began wiping at them with his sleeve in a helpless tangle. "Did I say something wrong again?" He made me laugh through my tears. I raised a fist and thumped his chest. The instant I touched him, he hissed in pain. I snatched my hand back in fright. He only grinned like a fool. There, you stopped crying. I stared at him. Then I suddenly leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Hanyue froze. Red crept from his ears all the way down his neck. My own face burned. I turned away. Consider that compensation for the beating you took today. After a long silence, he asked in a very small voice, Then may I get beaten again tomorrow, Hanyue? That same night, I went to the Pei residence. I brought the luminous pearl Pei Jingheng had given me years before. It was the last thing of his I had kept, not because I could not bear to part with it for a long time. I had simply thought of it as proof that once I had truly loved someone. I no longer needed such proof. Pei Jingheng seemed to have known I would come. A whole table of dishes I had once loved waited in the front hall. He poured wine for me himself. Have you grown accustomed to country living? I looked at him. The southern quarter hardly counts as the countryside. Some of the smile left his face. You used to fear hardship more than anything. Only because someone was forever telling me that I ought to fear it. I pushed the luminous pearl across the table toward him. Take it back. Pei Jingheng's expression changed. What is this supposed to mean? It means that from this day onward, there is nothing left between us. You sent men to wreck Hanyue's stall. That was the first time, and it will be the last. His gaze turned cold. You came here to threaten me for his sake. It is not a threat. I looked directly at him, though my fingers trembled faintly inside my sleeves. It was not that I felt no fear. The Pei clan had stood among Shangjing's great families for 100 years. I was an ordinary woman with neither father nor mother. What power had I to pit myself against them? But whenever I remembered the bruise around Hanyue's wrist, somehow I could sit steady. Pei Jingheng, in the past, the person you hurt was me. I endured it. Now you have laid hands on my husband. That is another matter entirely. The word husband seemed to strike him like a blade. Shen Ji, do you truly think of yourself as one of the Han household now? I suddenly laughed. If I do not belong to the Han household, what should I be instead? A kept woman of the Pei clan. His face darkened completely. I rose. When I reached the door, he called after me. Ji, I stopped. If you turn back now, it is not too late. For one brief instant, my eyes still stung. If only he had said those words 2 years ago. If back then he had said marry me instead of be mine. Perhaps everything might have been different. But the most useless words in any life are if only. I did not turn around. It is already too late. When I left the front hall, I encountered Shi Lingyi beneath the covered gallery. She wore a blue-green gown beneath a heavy cloak. Her complexion was indeed paler than most, yet she looked nothing like the fragile creature gossip had made her out to be. She studied me for a moment, then bowed first. Miss Shen, I returned the courtesy. Madame Pei's. She gave a bitter little smile. There is no need to call me that. Why, it sounds rather too much like a reminder of what sort of man I married. I stared at her for 2 full breaths. Then I could not help laughing. It was the first time I truly looked at her. Shi Lingyi laughed as well. That made her laugh so hard she coughed twice. When the coughing passed, she drew a sheet of paper from her sleeve and handed it to me. I opened it. It belonged to one of the men who had smashed Hanyue's stall. Pei Jingheng? I asked. Shi Lingyi nodded. He thought he had hidden it neatly enough. Unfortunately for him, the Pei household accounts are kept by the nephew of my old nurse. My grip tightened around the paper. Why help me? Zilingyi was silent for a long time. Because he annoys me too. She lifted her eyes to mine. Before our wedding, he told you he had no choice but to marry me. After our wedding, he told me his heart had always belonged to you, and that I would be a fool to expect his true affection. Miss Shen, if the 2 of us were to torment each other over a man like that, we would be granting him far more importance than he deserves. For the first time, I understood why people said a minister's legitimate daughter was raised differently from common girls. Before I left, she said, "Keep that paper. If he touches Hanyue again, come to me." I looked at her. You are not afraid of him. Lingyi smiled. I am. But fear is fear. It does not mean one must yield forever. I remembered those words for a long time. Pei Jingheng remained quiet for 2 months. I thought he had finally come to his senses. Later, I learned that he had merely changed his method. Suddenly, Han Yue could no longer obtain meat for his shop. Farmers who had supplied him for years began claiming, one after another, that their livestock had fallen ill. Several taverns in the city stopped buying from him as well. Then, in the most absurd turn of all, the owner of our shop suddenly demanded the property back. Han Yue sat on the threshold for a long while without speaking. I stood behind him in silence. We both knew who had done it. At last, he looked up. What if we went to Yangzhou? I stared at him. I thought you loved Shangjing more than anywhere. I used to. And now? He looked at me and smiled. Wherever you are, that is the place I like. Had Pei Jingheng said such a thing, I would probably have thought he was merely soothing me with pretty words. When Han Yue said it, I believed him. Because the very next day, he truly began selling our belongings. The old chopping block went first. Then the extra wooden tubs. He even asked a shun to find a buyer for the black donkey he had kept for years. The sight of it sat heavier and heavier in my chest. That night, while we packed, I finally said, if you had never married me, you would not have to leave Shangjing. Han Yue was tying a rope around one of the chests. He turned his head. There you go again. What? Carrying his wrongs on your back as though they were yours. My nose stung. But you had a good life before. Before, I ate alone, slept alone. If I fell ill, no one knew. If I earned money, I had no one I cared to spend it on. He came over and crouched in front of me. It is different now. How is it different? Now there is someone to scold me because my accounts look dreadful. I glared at him. He smiled. Simone makes me padded coats. Simone waits for me to come home. Simone kisses me. You may be silent on that last point. He obeyed at once, the smile in his eyes, however, refused to disappear. I looked at him, then suddenly wrapped my arms around his neck. Han Yue went still for an instant before gently circling his arms around me. Ji, when we reach Yangzhou, I still mean to sell meat. Could you not show the smallest grain of ambition? Then I will open 2 shops. I laughed against his shoulder. Very well. Once we make enough money, we will go to Gusu. Very well. Then farther south. You can see the places your mother once knew. Very well. I lifted my head. Why do you agree to everything? He considered it seriously. Because I am going with you. My eyes filled at once. The next day, Lingyi sent Qingdai with a letter. It contained only one sentence. Men are waiting at the southern gate. Do not take the official road. I stared at the words, cold creeping down my spine. Pei Jingheng had truly gone this far. Han Yue's face hardened. He burned the letter. We leave tonight. We did not wait for dawn. We took only 2 chests and slipped out of the city by a small western road. Rain began after nightfall. Halfway along the road, a row of lanterns suddenly flared ahead of us. More than a dozen guards from the Pei household blocked the way. I recognized the man at their head. He was one of Pei Jingheng's stewards. Miss Shen. He clasped his hands in greeting. My young master asks that you return and speak with him for a little while. Han Yue stepped in front of me. She is not going. The steward sighed. Shopkeeper Han, do not make this difficult for us. Then do not do it. I had never seen Han Yue lose his temper. That night was the first time. He seized my hand and spoke under his breath. I will hold them back. You run into the trees. Number, listen to me, Han Yue. He looked back at me. Rain ran down the hard line of his brow. Shi Yi, this once. Let me protect you. My heart dropped. The next instant, the 2 sides crashed together. I never knew who struck first. I only saw lanterns fall into the mud, the horses rear in fright, and the road dissolve into chaos. A man rushed toward me. Han Yue shoved me aside. A wooden staff came down hard across his shoulder and back. He staggered. I screamed his name. Then the carriage lurched violently and struck the stone barrier at the roadside. Darkness swallowed my sight. The last thing I saw was Hanya reaching for me. When I woke, I lay in an unfamiliar room. It was not the PI residence. It was an abandoned country estate beyond the city walls. Pei Jingheng sat by the window. The first words out of my mouth were, "Where is Han Yue?" He did not answer. I forced myself upright against the bed. "I asked you where Han Yue is." Pei Jingheng looked at me for a long time, dead. One word, my ears began to ring. "What did you say?" When the horse bolted, he fell down the slope. By the time my men found him, he was no longer breathing. I stared at him. I understood every word separately, yet my mind refused to join them together. Han Yue was dead. The man who that very morning had asked whether 2 butcher shops in Yangzhou might satisfy my demand for ambition was dead. I thought of his padded coat lying at the top of one of our chests. I thought of the ridiculous pellet drum he had packed as well, insisting it must sit on my dressing table in our new home. I thought of him saying that once we reached Yangzhou, the first thing we should do was find a pastry shop. Something tore open inside my chest. My mouth moved, no sound came. Pei Jingheng rose and reached for me. I recoiled violently. "Do not touch me." His hand froze in the air. "Ziyi, I never meant for him to die." I looked at him, then the tears began. I did not wail. They simply fell, one after another, and would not stop. "Pei Jingheng, what is it you want from me?" His throat worked. "I want you to come back." I laughed. My entire body shook with it. "Come back. I never belonged to you." That night, I did not cry aloud again. After Pei Jingheng left, I sat alone until dawn. Just before the sky brightened, the door opened softly. Qingdai slipped inside. She pressed a scrap of paper into my hand. I looked down. Only 4 characters were written there. "He still lives." It felt as though every drop of blood in my body began flowing again at once. Qingdai lowered her voice. "Madam's people found shopkeeper Han and took him away. His injuries are severe, but he lives." I gripped her hand with both of mine, truly. Truly. I closed my eyes. My legs gave way and I sank to the floor. I covered my face while tears poured between my fingers. This time, however, they were the tears of someone returning to life. When I had cried myself empty, I slowly raised my head. "Where is Xie Lingyi?" "Madam has already returned to the Xie household. She intends to seek a separation." I stared, Qingdai continued. "Madam said the Pi family has indulged the young master's recklessness for too many years. Someone ought to open the ledgers and settle each account properly." I looked out at the pale light gathering beyond the window. The weakness in me settled, little by little, into something hard. Han Yue was alive, then I had no right to keep being afraid. When Pei Jingheng came again the next day, I had already dressed and arranged my hair. The sight of me sitting upright brought actual joy into his eyes. "Ji," I did not shrink away from him. Instead, I asked, "When you said you wanted me back, did you mean it?" He stared at me. "Of course. Then marry me." His entire body went still. I watched hope brighten his eyes by degrees. I felt no satisfaction. Only cold once. I had begged for that promise until my heart bled. Now I needed only soften my voice, and he was willing to give it. Not because he had finally understood. Because he was finally afraid of losing me. "What of Xie Lingyi?" I asked. "The Xie family has already requested a separation." He said it lightly, as though a living woman had been nothing more than a place that had finally been vacated. I lowered my eyes. "I have 3 conditions. Name them." "First, the butcher's shop that was destroyed because of you. You will have it rebuilt at your own expense." Pei Jingheng's expression stiffened. I continued. "Second, every rumor you allowed to spread about me over the years will be corrected, one by one. Whoever your people paid, whatever lies they were told to repeat, I want those same mouths to speak the truth." He fell silent. I looked up. "What is it? Cannot be done." "It can." The words came through clenched teeth. "And the third?" I held his gaze. "I want the account books and the witnesses connected to all of it. I want to know exactly how many kindnesses you have done for me over the years." Unease flickered in his eyes. Gee, all of that is in the past. Did you not say you love me? My voice was soft. If you truly do, then let me see everything clearly. That left him nowhere to retreat. In the end, he agreed. The next half-month gave Shangjing more entertainment than it had enjoyed in years. First, the battered butcher's shop in the southern quarter was suddenly restored from roof to threshold with PI money. Then several of the loudest gossips began going from house to house, admitting that they had once been paid to slander me. Before long, even the storytellers in the tea-houses were saying, Miss Shen was innocent all along. A certain noble young master could not win her. So he ruined her name instead. People in Shangjing loved a spectacle. Once they had cursed me. Now they praised me for having a spine. Whenever I heard it, I found the whole thing bitterly amusing. People's tongues truly were lighter than the wind. The only news that mattered to me came from Qingdai every 3 days. Han Yue has awakened. Han Yue can get out of bed now. Han Yue asks whether you are eating properly again. When I read the last line, I held the scrap of paper and laughed for a long time. Then I began to cry. I wanted to see him, wanted it until my chest hurt. But Xie Lingyi told me to wait a little longer. If you go now, Pei Jingheng will notice. We will have only one chance. I knew, so I endured. Pei Jingheng, meanwhile, grew happier by the day. He truly began preparing our wedding. He summoned the finest embroiderers in Shangjing and asked what patterns I preferred. He brought casket after casket of jewels for me to choose from. He even had the bridal chamber arranged according to things I had mentioned carelessly years ago. You once said you liked scarlet phoenix curtains. I remembered. There was something almost pleading in his eyes when he said it. I looked at everything before me and suddenly remembered the girl I had been years ago. How desperately she had wanted all of this. I had imagined it 1,000 times. If Pei Jingheng ever agreed to marry me, what gown would I wear? What flowers would I embroider on my veil? Would I frighten him deliberately on our wedding night just to see his face? Now every dream had been laid before me, and all I could think of was Han Yue's little courtyard, the window that always leaked a draught, the cured meat hanging beneath the locust tree. The first cup of hot tea he had pushed into my hands. Pei Jingheng asked, "Do you like it?" I returned to myself. "I do," he smiled. So did I. Only the things we loved had never been the same. The wedding was set for the 3rd day of the 3rd month. The begonias of Shangjing would be blooming. Then Pei Jingheng said it was the day we had first met. I looked at him and did not tell him what else it would be. The last day in his life that he would ever see me in bridal red. On the 3rd day of the 3rd month, the PI residence blazed with lanterns and crimson silk red. Cloth ran from the gates all the way down the long street. Crowds gathered 3 deep to watch. Everyone spoke of Pei Jingheng's devotion. For the sake of a woman of humble birth, they said, he had let his marriage to the daughter of a minister end, and insisted on bringing his beloved through the front gate in a full bridal procession. What a moving tale had. I'd been a stranger who knew none of what came before. Perhaps I would have believed it too. I sat before the mirror while Qingdai dressed my hair. "Nervous?" she asked. "Very afraid." Yes. I met her eyes in the mirror. I am not forged from iron. Qingdai smiled. "My lady says the fact that you can admit fear means you are stronger than before. Is she here?" "She is." I slowly let out a breath. "And Han Yue?" Qingdai deliberately said nothing. I whipped around. At last she smiled. "He is here too." My eyes turned red at once. I had not seen him once in half a month. A handful of tiny notes had been all that kept me steady. Qingdai patted my shoulder. "Do not fret. You will see him very soon." When the auspicious hour arrived, I did not cover my face with a veil. Dressed in brilliant red, I walked into the Pei family's front hall, one measured step at a time. Pei Jingheng stood waiting. The instant he saw me, his eyes lit with such brightness that it almost hurt to look at him. "See I suddenly remembered the night of my true wedding when he had burst into Han Yue's courtyard and called me in exactly that way. My heart had hurt then. It did not now. The Pei elders were all present, so were the guests. Xi Lingyi entered beneath a rising hum of whispers. She no longer wore the colours or ornaments of Madame Pei. She wore a pale blue-violet gown and only a single jade pin in her hair. She looked healthier than she ever had inside the Pei residence. Pei Jingheng's face changed at once. "What are you doing here?" Exilingyi smiled. "I came to offer you a wedding gift." She raised one hand. Qingdai set a wooden casket upon the table. Inside were ledgers, every payment Pei Jingheng had made over the years to spread rumors, smash Hanyue's stall, bribe brokers, and cut off Hanyue's sources of goods. There were signed statements as well, and witnesses' testimonies. The old master of the Pei clan looked darker with every page. "Jingheng, what is the meaning of this?" Pei Jingheng did not even look at him. His eyes remained fixed on me. "Ji Yi, you deceived me. For some reason, I found the accusation almost funny. Deceived you about what?" His face went white. I walked slowly to the table and once again placed the luminous pearl before him. It turned out he had never accepted it that night. Later, he had ordered someone to return it to me. I had kept it until this day. "Pei Jingheng, you have asked me again and again why I would rather marry a butcher than go with you. Today I will answer you for the last time." The hall grew so quiet that only breathing could be heard. I looked straight at him. "Because Hanyue treated me as his wife. And from beginning to end, you treated me as something you owned." Pei Jingheng's eyes reddened instantly. "Number, I love you. Ji Yi, I truly love you." Once, I had waited far too long to hear those words. So long that now, hearing them at last, I felt nothing. I asked softly, "Then do you know what frightens me most?" He froze. "Do you know whether I fear winter cold more, or thunder at night? Do you know that I dislike the thick icing on sweet cakes, or that whenever I am angry, I dig my nails into my own palm beneath my sleeve? Do you know that the first night after I asked whether you would marry me, I went home and cried until dawn?" Pei Jingheng opened his mouth. He could not answer a single question. I smiled. "You see, it was never me you loved. You loved the Shen Ji whose eyes were always fixed upon you. She made you feel as though there was nothing in this world beyond your reach. So the moment she stopped looking at you, you could not bear it." The color drained from his face by degrees. "Number, Ji, I can change. Whatever you want, I can give it to you now." By the end, he actually dropped to his knees before me in full view of everyone. The hall erupted in shock. Pei Jingheng, the proud young master who had been raised unable even to admit fault, was kneeling before me. 2 years earlier, perhaps my heart would have softened, but he was too late. I looked down at him. "Pei Jingheng, what I want is something you can no longer give. What is it? The past." At last, tears fell from his eyes. I felt no triumph, only weariness. All those years I had waited, wept, and refused to let go seemed to dissolve at once. In this life, I have married only once. My husband's name is Han. Pei Jingheng's head jerked up. Tears surged into my eyes in an instant. I turned. Hanyue stood in the doorway. He had grown much thinner. His shoulder was still wrapped in bandages, and his face had not yet regained its color. But he was alive, standing there before me, alive and whole enough to smile. For half a month I had imagined the first words I would say when I saw him. I would scold him for letting himself be hurt so badly. I would ask whether he was still in pain. I would tell him how difficult it had been to pretend all this time. Yet, when I truly saw him, not one word would come. All I could do was cry. Hanyue hurried toward me. "Do not cry. Be quiet." I wept and struck at him at the same time. "Were you not terribly capable? Did you not say you would protect me? What sort of protection leaves you looking like this?" I was wrong. "That is what you always say. Then I will say something else." He thought for a moment. "Wife, I missed you." I cried harder. Then I threw myself into his arms. Hanyue sucked in a breath from the pain but did not dare move away. Gently, "It would serve you right if it hurt." "That will not do." "Why not?" "I have not taken you to Yangzhou yet." I buried my face against his shoulder and laughed through my tears. Behind us, Pei Jingheng was still on his knees. I never looked back. The matter of the Pei family became a great scandal in the end. Not because of me, because of Xia Lingyi. She returned the ledgers to the Xia household and laid out, one by one, every reckless thing Pei Jingheng had done over the years while sheltering behind his family name. To preserve what remained of their reputation, the Pi elders forced him to surrender all the shops under his control and every duty he held within the clan. Then they sent him to the ancestral estate in another province to remain in seclusion and reflect upon his conduct. The stewards who had bullied others in his name were dismissed as well. As for Han Ye and me, we did not remain in Shangjing. The butcher's shop had been repaired, but we still went to Yangzhou. Before leaving, we gave the shop to a shun. He clung to the doorframe and cried as though his own brother had died. Han Yue looked thoroughly disgusted. It is not as though we can never come back. A shun wiped his face. You are coming back? Han Yue looked at me. I shook my head. I do not know. Aunts, I had believed a person needed one place in which to put down roots. Later I understood. A home is not a place. It is a person. With Han Yue beside me, anywhere could become home. Yangzhou was warmer than Shangjing. We took over a little shop in the southern quarter. Han Yue, just as promised, continued selling meat. And, to my astonishment, he truly opened a second shop. I kept the accounts. His task was to be scolded every day for writing them like a man fighting with his own brush. Half a year later, we had saved enough to travel through Jiangnan. I stood for a long time before the sight of the music house where my mother had once lived. The place had changed hands many years before. 2 willow trees now grew beside the street. Han Yue asked. Are you sad? I considered it. A little. Do you want to cry? I turned on him. Why are you always so eager for me to cry? Because you feel better after you cry. I turned to look at him. And how would you know? With complete seriousness, he said, because you always eat more afterward. I chased him down half the street trying to hit him. That night we stayed at an inn beside the river. I dreamed of my mother. She was young again, sitting by a window with a chin beneath her hands. She did not wear the troubled frown I remembered so well. She only looked at me and smiled. When I woke, I discovered tears on my face. Han Yue was still asleep. I reached out and touched his brow. Half awake, he caught my hand. What is it? Nothing. Are you cold? I suddenly laughed all these years, and it was still the same question. I moved closer into his arms. Han Yue, have I ever told you when I first began to like you? He woke completely in an instant. When? I refused to tell him. He pestered me for the answer all along the road. Later, we went to Gushu, then to many other places I had once known only from books. Han Yue never learned the answer. In truth, it was very simple. It was the first day we met. So many people had looked at me and seen my face first. Only he had looked at me and noticed that I was cold. Pei Jingheng's epilogue. There was one thing Pei Jingheng had never lacked in his life, other people's affection. He was born into the Pei clan and opened his eyes to a world in which everything had already been prepared for him. The finest tutors, the finest clothes, the finest horses. Whatever he wanted, he needed only glance at it for someone to place it before him. That was why he learnt so late that there truly were things in this world no amount of wanting could obtain. Shen Ji was one of them. He first saw her beneath a begonia tree. The flowers were in full bloom that day. She stood beneath a gallery waiting for someone, dressed in an ordinary pale blue-green gown with nothing but a silver pin in her hair. Pei Jingheng saw her at once. In later years, he would see countless beauties in Shangjing. None resembled her. It was not her face. It was the way she looked at people, clear-eyed, open, unashamed. As though she had never learned what it meant to lower her gaze because of humble birth. She came from so little, yet she stood straighter than many daughters of great houses. At first, Pei Jingheng merely found her interesting. Then he liked her more and more. He was willing to give her the finest jewels. He turned down banquets with friends for her. In heavy snow, he rode across half the city merely to buy a pastry she had mentioned once. He believed that was love. So when Shen Ji asked, "Will you marry me?" he found the question difficult. It was not that he did not love her. He could not marry her. At least, that was what he told himself then. The Pei clan required a marriage alliance with a family of equal standing. With Shen Ji's birth, she could never become the principal wife who presided over the Pei household. He was willing to give her a private residence, money, a lifetime of favor. Was that not enough? He could not understand why she clung so stubbornly to a title at times. It even angered him. She loved him so deeply. Why could she not yield one step for his sake? Only later did he understand. That question had always belonged to him. If he loved her so deeply, why had it never occurred to him to yield even one step for her? By the time he understood, it was already too late. On the night Shen Ji married Han Yue, Pei Jingheng stood outside the Han courtyard for a long time. Two shadows moved across the paper window. Han Yue seemed to be pouring water for her. Shen Ji called him clumsy and laughed while scolding him about something. Pei Jingheng could not hear the words through the door. He heard only her laughter. He had not heard her laugh that way in a very long time. Once, when she was with him, she had laughed like that too. Then, at some point he could no longer remember, she had grown quiet whenever she saw him. He had never noticed. He had merely thought she had finally learned to behave. Pei Jingheng felt true fear for the first time when he saw Shen Ji collecting money at Han Yue's market stall. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows. A single wooden hairpin held her hair. Beside the chopping block sat a half-finished bowl of plain noodles. Han Yue said something. She swatted him with the account book. He did not grow angry. He only grinned like a fool. That was when Pei Jingheng finally understood. She was not trying to provoke him. She was truly living her life. She truly meant to spend that life with another man. The realization lodged in his heart like a thorn. After that, he began doing things that even he would later remember with shame. He sent men to smash Han Yue's stall. He pressured suppliers to refuse him goods. He had the shop taken back by its landlord. He kept telling himself that if Han Yue could no longer make a living, Shen Ji would naturally remember who had the power to protect her. He never considered the obvious truth. Every time he did such a thing, she moved a little farther away from him. The night she came to the PI residence to return the luminous pearl, he was frightened beneath all his arrogance. That was why he deliberately asked, "Have you grown accustomed to a poor man's life?" He wanted to see regret in her face. Even the smallest trace would have been enough. Instead, whenever she spoke of Han Yue, her eyes shone. "He is my husband," she said. Pei Jingheng remembered those words for the rest of his life. Later, Shi Lingyi once asked him, "Pei Jingheng, what do you actually want from Shen Ji?" He answered. Shi Lingyi laughed. "Number, you do not want her back. You want her to love you the way she did before." He flew into a rage at the time. Looking back, he knew she had been entirely right. What he truly could not endure was that Shen Ji no longer loved him. So when he believed Han Yue was dead, and Shen Ji finally softened and agreed to marry him, he truly thought he had won. Those 15 days became, in the long years that followed, both the happiest and the most absurd of his life. He chose the red silk himself. He arranged the wedding feast himself. He even found the same workshop from years before and had a begonia hairpin made almost identical to the one he had once placed in her hair. He wanted to restore, one by one, every piece of the past he had neglected. He did not understand that once something has been broken, no repair can make it the untouched thing it was before. The 3rd day of the 3rd month came. At last, Pei Jingheng stood before her in wedding red. Shen Ji wore bridal robes as well. In that moment he thought, so a man truly can carry the same wish in his heart for years. He had even decided what he would say first when they were finally alone in the bridal chamber. He would tell her, "Ji, this time I am marrying you." Instead, he ended that day on his knees before her. She said, "What I want is something you can no longer give." He asked what it was. She answered, "The past." For many years afterward, Pei Jingheng returned again and again to those words, the past. Only then did he understand that the most precious things in this world were never luminous pearls, silver, gold, or influence. They were the days when you had a chance to cherish someone, and did not. After Pei Jingheng was sent to the ancestral estate, he did not return to Shangjing for a long time. At first, he refused to accept what had happened. He believed everyone had chosen to blame him. His father blamed him for disgracing the family. Shi Lingyi blamed him for his selfishness. Even an old servant who had attended him since childhood finally said, "Young master, some people are not possessions that belong to you." He wanted to hear none of them. Then one winter, he fell ill. He burned with fever through the night and drifted in and out of sleep, certain he could hear someone calling his name. He thought it was Shen Jiyi. When he opened his eyes, the room was empty. And suddenly he remembered one of the times Shen Jiyi had been ill years before. He had sent her an expensive box of medicinal herbs. He had never once poured her a cup of water with his own hands. Han Yue would have. The thought came quietly. With it came understanding. Pei Jingheng had always known how to give her things that made the whole world envious. Han Yue gave her the things she actually needed. 5 years later, Pei Jingheng returned to Shangjing once. Shi Lingyi had long since built a life of her own. She never remarried. Instead, she took charge of several shops belonging to the Xia family and lived quite freely. When they happened to meet in the street, she merely inclined her head to him, as one might greet an old acquaintance not seen in many years. Pei Jingheng suddenly asked, "And she?" Shi Lingyi knew perfectly well whom he meant. "I hear she is in Yangzhou. Is she well?" "Very," she paused. "You would do well not to disturb her." Pei Jingheng smiled bitterly. "I know." This time he truly did. 2 more years passed. Busyness took him to Yangzhou. On a street beside the river, he saw a shop. A wooden sign hung above the entrance, Han's shop. He stood there for a long time. Reason told him to leave. His feet would not move. Then a woman's laughter drifted from inside. His whole body went still. Shen Jiyi stepped out of the shop. 7 years had passed. She seemed not to have changed at all, and yet somehow everything about her had changed. She wore an ordinary lotus root-colored dress. Her hair was simply pinned up, and an account book rested in one hand. Han Yue followed her outside, flour dusting his fingers. Apparently, they had added a pastry business in the rear courtyard. With open disdain, Shen Jiyi brushed a patch of white flour from his shoulder. Han Yue lowered his head obediently and let her fuss over him. Then he said something Pei Jingheng could not hear. She laughed across the busy street. Pei Jingheng watched them through the passing crowd. Without warning, he remembered a day many years ago, beneath a tree heavy with begonias. She had laughed in exactly the same way. Back then she had turned to look at him. No, she would not. Han Yue draped an outer robe over her shoulders. "The wind is strong. Are you cold?" Pei Jingheng heard him clearly. Shen Ji shook her head. "After all these years, is that still the only thing you know how to ask?" Han Yue laughed. "It works, does it not?" Side by side, they turned toward the shop. Just as Shen Ji was about to cross the threshold, Pei Jingheng called out without thinkings. "Ji." His voice was very soft, so soft that only he himself heard it. She did not turn around. Not once. Pei Jingheng remained where he was. Then, suddenly, he smiled. His eyes slowly reddened. At last he admitted the truth. It was not that Shen Ji had given him chance after chance throughout her life, and he had missed them all. From beginning to end, he had only ever been given one chance. It was the first time she asked him, "Pei Jingheng, will you marry me?" Back then, he had not answered. And because he had not answered then, every answer he gave afterward had already ceased to matter. I am still recovering from that final scene. Besties, the image of Pei Jingheng standing across the street, watching Shen Jiyi laugh with Han Yue, finally understanding that the only chance he ever had was the first time she asked him to marry him, and he said nothing. That is the sharpest kind of heartbreak, because it is not about losing her, it is about realizing he never truly had her. But let's talk about why this story matters beyond the romance, because it is rooted in something very real from imperial China, the difference between a lawful wife and a concubine. In the traditional marriage system, a wife, a Qiu entered her husband's home through the front gate, wearing true scarlet red with a full phoenix crown. Her name went into the family register as the primary spouse. Her children were the legitimate heirs. She held legal authority over the household. A concubine, a chiefei, entered through a side gate. Her wedding clothes were often a muted red or pomegranate, never true scarlet. Her phoenix crown would be visibly shortened. She had no legal authority, and her children ranked below those of the wife. This wasn't a minor social slight. It was a legal demotion that affected everything from inheritance to personal dignity. So when Pei Jingheng kept saying, "Be mine" instead of "marry me," he wasn't just being non-committal. He was telling Shen Ji in the politest possible way that she would never stand beside him as an equal. He wanted her love, her beauty, her devotion, but he wanted them through the side gate, neatly tucked away. For my Western girlies, imagine in Bridgerton that a gentleman showers you with jewels and private dinners, but when the time comes, he tells you he must marry a lady of rank, and you could be his special friend in a house he provides. That is the Victorian mistress arrangement, and it is exactly what being a concubine meant. The front gate wasn't just a door. It was the symbol of whether you were a person or a possession. And here is what I love most about Shen Ji. She didn't need a grand rebellion. She just refused to accept a lowered status. She chose a butcher who had no wealth or title, but who looked at her and saw a whole person. He didn't offer her gold. He offered her his name, his home, and the front gate. And that is the difference between being cherished and being owned. If you want to review today's cultural tea, I've put all the aesthetic notes in the description box below. And besties, have you ever had to choose between a grand promise that would keep you waiting and a simple love that showed up for you? Tell me in the comments. Love you all. See you next time. My front gate, deserving queens.